Okay.
Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to another dope episode of Terrence Swears. And I got super passionate about that for a second because I'm really stoked for this episode because I think it's a product of two like minded worlds that collided and we became friends. So I've got my friend Brooke Erickson on the show today, and she's a functional nutritionist and founder of Nourish Thrive that's been in practice for 7 years. Brooks earned her undergrad degree in nutrition from Bastyr University and has a master's degree in nutrition and functional medicine. So this chick knows her stuff. You guys are going to love her. But what's really cool is with a functional medicine approach, Brooks specializes in digestive disorders and chronic health issues, including mitochondrial dysfunction, autoimmune issues, histamine intolerances, chronic fatigue, hormone imbalances, diabetes, fertility and preconception, and just a laundry list of other really fascinating topics that I think you guys are really going to love. Not that we're going to cover all those today, but we're going to get into some really, really good stuff. In fact, today's episode is called Thriving in a Toxic World. So there's a lot to unpack, but Brooke's going to do a really slick job of making sure that we can really truly understand what all this means and really what we can do as soon as this episode's over. So with that, Brooke, what's up? Thank you so much for being here. I'm really honored that you took time out of your day. I know this, you've got a lot going on, so thank you so much for being here and willing to share.
Yeah. Hi, Taryn. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be able to talk about this. I'm very passionate about really helping people understand things they can do to, yeah, help themselves really navigate all of the toxins that are in our world at this point that, maybe we're aware of, maybe we're not aware of, right? And I think knowledge is power. So the more we know, the more we can make better choices. And I love Maya Angelou's saying, when you know better, do better. And so that's kind of the motto I like to live by and teach others. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Good. So tell us how, like the how and why you got into this. Like, where did all this stem from, and what really catapulted you into what you do now?
Yeah, so I grew up like many people eating, all the processed foods and all the things. And my grandmother, who I was extremely close with growing up, passed away really young at like the age of 65 from lymphoma cancer. And I'm a walking, spitting image of my grandmother. And so there was something that just clicked with me when I was younger that, oh my gosh, these are my genes. What does that mean for me? And it just sent me on this curiosity and quest for learning what I can do for my health to be more preventative. Because a lot of, what I've learned is epigenetics, right, which is how our environment and our food, et cetera, impact our genes and the expression of those. And so that's really what led me to all of this. And nutrition was kind of the gateway. And then it's just continued to grow and evolve from there. But specific to toxins in our world, you can imagine how important that is when it comes to cancer prevention. So this is why this is kind of near and dear to my heart.
Good. Well, I feel like there's always a story behind, when we dive into careers and we start working independently and, our passions obviously tend to be fulfilled by something, which is as unfortunate as what you've experienced with losing your grandma, which that's such a young age. And that was probably the exact age actually that my dad passed away. And this, like, he's fueled a lot of why I love researching and learning and connecting with other like-minded people to expand on all the things in our worlds that we actually have control over.
Right.
And so I wanted to really dive into that with you because you're so knowledgeable, but you really allow it to make sense. So let's unpack this topic on thriving in a toxic environment. I mean, we can take it in so many different directions, right?
Yes.
But that's truly your expertise and where you thrive. So oh, no pun intended, but that was really it went really well, right?
It
But
did.
let's talk about that and take that in direction that why this arm of wellness is something that you really do put a focus on in your practice.
Yeah, sure. So I will try to keep this as, simple as possible. As I shared a minute ago, I get a bit sciencey sometimes. So definitely let me know if I need to simplify and explain something. But
Oh, don't
um,
worry, I will.
so this is obviously a huge topic. And I could talk for hours and days probably about all of this. And so I thought today we can focus primarily on one particular kind of branch of toxins, which is a type of environmental toxins, which are endocrine disruptors. And so I think there's a lot we can do when we have more information on ways we can reduce our exposure. And so I want to bring that to everyone's attention and talk a little bit about the endocrine system, which is, one of the most, it's kind of the puppet master of our body. And so what it's doing is it's regulating just about every bodily function that's going on. So it's regulating energy balance, growth, your mood, your metabolism, the function of your organs, your whole reproductive system, regulation of body weight. All of that falls under the endocrine system. And so as you can imagine, if that's not working well, the wheels start coming off the cart and we start to see lots of different ways this can show up. So the endocrine system it's made up of many different parts of the body. So that includes your adrenal glands, your ovaries or the testes, the hypothalamus. So you've heard maybe of the HPA axis, which is your hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. Those three work kind of in tandem. Your pancreas, which is responsible for production of insulin. So think of any sort of metabolic disease or things related to diabetes. This falls within that. Your parathyroid, your actual thyroid gland, which a lot of people know that one specifically, and pretty common to have some dysfunction there. And then your pituitary gland, your pineal gland, so lots of different areas, and they all are responsible for managing different hormones. Like the pineal really manages our circadian rhythm, which is our wake and sleep cycle, which releases melatonin. So as you can see, I think everyone is impacted by this because these are just the fundamental, bodily functions that we need to be making sure are able to work well. So basically this endocrine system, and what they do is they secrete these chemical messengers. And so these messengers go to different parts of the body and they're communicating with different cells and sending a message, telling them, what to do or what function, regulating everything. And just providing instruction. And so when we start thinking of things that can be disruptive to that, all sorts of toxins are potentially impactful. And so just to high level before we dive into these, this could be heavy metals, it could be pesticides, parasites, mycotoxins and mold, radioactive elements. There's so many different types of toxins, and that's why I said this could be a really long topic. So we're going to just focusing on these endocrine disrupting chemicals today. But just know that this is just one piece of the puzzle. And something like parasites, for example, which is, I say that and people cringe and they're like, ugh, I don't have parasites. And I'm like, well, do you have a pulse? Because you probably have parasites. Everyone pretty much has them and they just live among us, kind of like our bacteria. But unfortunately, they've actually become a bit more problematic, or at least we're starting to really uncover the role they're playing in health issues. But the important thing that I want to mention about that is they act like sponges. So they hold all these other toxins in them. And so sometimes if we don't clear those out, then, we're maybe doing these detoxes and not making progress. And that can be one reason, is that we haven't really got to the mother load of who's really storing those. So anyway, that's a whole nother conversation, but I just wanted to briefly mention that. So
let me ask you a quick question.
yeah.
So when because I feel like I've heard a lot, and there's a lot of buzz in whether it's on social media or just whatever about like heavy toxins, metal toxins. Can you maybe just briefly share like what are examples of those, and where are they on our day to day?
Yeah, so we are exposed to those pretty readily as well. So the big ones that I see quite often would be things like mercury, which can be in your silver fillings in your mouth. So if you've ever had fillings, that's one source. They actually slowly leach mercury into your system when you have them. So if you have those at this moment, I would go seek out a biological dentist, someone who specializes in this and is doing it in the right way. If you go have mercury fillings removed without that level of care through a dentist, it's going to actually make you more sick. So it's really important you seek that out. Other things can be arsenic. So arsenic is actually really high in certain foods. So rice can be high in arsenic. Chicken can be high in arsenic. It's just kind of in different food systems. Aluminum would be another one. This can come from cooking products like pots and pans and things like that. Obviously, vaccines quite often have aluminum, so there's been a lot of buzz about that in the past. Same with mercury. Cadmium, let's see what else. There's a whole list of them. So they're just kind of, they're in, yeah, there are different ways that we can get them. Lead was a big one. So for a long time we had lead in our paint, which is why if you've ever moved into a home, there's like disclosures and things that be provided that, state the status of whether there was lead in the paint, things like that. So they're just pretty ubiquitous in our environment at this point. And, unfortunately, depending on what you're exposed to throughout your life depends on, whether or not that's an issue for you.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you for clarifying that, because I just feel like everyone hears that and they're like, but where is it and what should I be looking for? So
yeah. Oh, another one I should mention is mercury is in fish quite often. Fish are a big source of that. So the smaller the fish, the less likely. So that's why things like wild caught salmon, mackerel, sardines, those omega-3 rich cold water fish are typically lower in those metals.
I actually did see, and tell me if you agree with this while we're on the topic of fish, because I do advise clients on a nutritional standpoint, like healthy convenience. There's a lot of healthy, convenient options out there. But there was a test that I had seen on the tuna that we can get at Costco. There was 2 brands. And are you familiar with these 2 brands? The ones I'm referring to, I think Safe Catch was the one that actually tested very low. It's a yellow tin. Would you agree with that? That of the 2, Wild Planet and any other brands, would that be the best option?
I think Safe Catch can be good. Tuna is one of those things where even if it's low, the thing when they say low, so they put out guidelines as to what is considered safe, a safe level. And so, it's low within that range, but really you're still getting exposed to it. So I don't personally recommend tuna very often. I try to steer people away from that. You can have it every once in a while. I think that's fine. But I definitely, even if it in Safe Catch of the 2 is probably the safest because they are doing extra testing. But it really just comes back to how well are you detoxing? There's so many factors that can influence how well you detox. And so if you have a sluggish liver and you're not doing a good job clearing metals and you've got, different genes that are not working properly and clearing that, even a little bit on a regular basis could make one person really sick and another person could be perfectly fine. So this is where it's kind of individualized and hard to know unless, you're doing testing and doing all this stuff to really understand that, or you get sick and then you figure it out that way. So,
right. That's when sometimes you're like, shit, that's too late now.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. All right, so we were going down the road of endocrine-disrupting chemicals, right?
Yes.
So I wanted to get us back on track because I'm really good at okay, let's go off on this direction.
I know. Well, that's like I said, there's so many things to talk about, so it's easy to do. Okay, so these endocrine-disrupting chemicals, they're man-made, right? And so they're mostly industrial chemicals. They're metals. They're different types of pesticides. Polymers, which can be different forms of plastics, so like PVC, things like that. Any sort of synthetic hormones, so synthetic estrogens or androgens, things in birth control pills, pharmaceuticals, we find it a lot in those different kinds of areas. So the main way that we get them is that they're either absorbed through the skin, they come through our food and water, or we inhale them through the air. So those are kind of the 3 main ways we're exposed to them. So this can be, so common other products would be like canned goods, plastic water bottles, different cookware. So like Teflon, right? We've probably heard at some point that Teflon isn't great. And so even though we all love nonstick, those chemicals, especially as they start to wear down, like if you have a Teflon nonstick pan that has scratches in it, that's not good. That's not a good sign. That's basically showing that that's now getting into your food.
Yummy.
So things like your drinking water, another big source of toxins, cosmetics, beauty care products, furniture. When you redo your house, it's got different chemicals that are in, the wood. What is that fake wood called that I can't think of right now? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh,
It's
yes.
kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my God. Now it's going to bug me.
Yeah. Like if you go to like, a really inexpensive furniture place and build it yourself, like whatever that's made of, that I'm totally blanking on the name, those
Totally.
type
Yeah.
of things.
You know, someone's sitting there going, screaming, going, it's called
I
wax.
know, I know.
Like right before we wrap up, don't worry. But
Right,
no, I
right.
get it. Yeah. Cleaning
Yeah.
supplies, how your carpets are cleaned,
Yep. Fragrance goods. So anything with fragrance, not good. We'll talk more about that. Flame retardants. So if you buy a new couch, it's great. They're going to make sure that that doesn't, catch on fire easily, but that the chemicals that they're spraying on that you're then, that are off gassing, that you're sitting there smelling, is not good. So medications, paint, any sort of plastic, I said pesticides, there's at least 1,500 different EDCs in our environment right now. So there's a lot. And then there's 84,000 different chemicals in the US alone that are in our environment. So we are exposed to them constantly all day long. It's kind of crazy.
Well, and it's not to, and I know we're not talking and sharing this to overwhelm and scare anyone,
No.
basically like don't leave your house, and like your house is basically killing you. It's more of just an awareness, piece, because I know you'll go into this, but there's so many things that we can do to, minimize our exposures, or at least release some of the buildup over time that our body might be holding on to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to go through all that. So first I'm going to run through a few different types of these EDCs.
Particle
And
board. Is that
what
it?
was that?
Particle board?
Well, yes, particle board.
Okay,
That is
see, I
it.
was like,
Yes.
it's going to come to me. I knew it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Okay, carry on.
So let's run through some of the different types and kind of common areas you would see them. And then this way we can talk through, okay, now how do we avoid these, right? So the biggest one that probably most people are most familiar with would be BPA. So BPA is plastic. You probably heard over the years, the big push for BPA free. And I don't want to be the, dream killer for everyone, but BPA free is basically a marketing ploy. All they did was switch BPA with BPS or some other BP variation, which has never been tested and is basically the same thing, just in a different box. So, really avoiding plastic altogether is what I recommend. And so this could be from canned goods. So a lot of cans are lined with BPA. So trying to buy things in either glass or other types of containers, buying in bulk is another way to kind of get around all the packaging. Obviously, Whole Foods also does that too, which is always a good choice. Plastic water bottles. So one of the things that people don't think about too is when heat is applied to the plastic, that's really where it leaches the most into the water. And so if you think of heat and plastic do not go well together. And so even if you go to a convenience store and let's say you go in and you buy this water that's cold and it's been sitting in the refrigerated section and you're like, oh, it's cold, it's fine. You have no idea if that bottle sat in a hot warehouse for 3 weeks before it was transported, right? So that's where, the unknown can be part of the problem with that. So as much as possible, using your own stainless steel or glass, some sort of water bottle that you can reuse is always going to be a better option. Obviously, sometimes you can't get around needing water and you're just somewhere and that just, it is what it is. So the other big one I want to mention with BPA is receipts. So when you go to the grocery store or whatever store that might be, and they print a receipt and give it to you, that receipt is laden with BPA. And so when I go to the store, I, as much as possible, either don't take a receipt if I don't need one, or I ask to be emailed, which is a great, or texting. They have a lot of different ways now. So opting for that as much as possible is also really helpful. One thing we're going to get to also in a second is hand sanitizer. They did studies where they put people, I should say, use hand sanitizer and then touched a receipt immediately after, and it exponentially increases the absorption of BPA into your skin. And so one big no-no is do not use hand sanitizer and then touch a receipt. That will definitely increase your absorption of that. So
I feel like we could have a entire episode on hand sanitizer.
we could.
We've had side conversations about kind of all this like woo-woo stuff that people might think we're nutty, right? And that's fine.
I'm used to it.
We're nutty. But so many people, just to touch on the hand sanitizer, feel like that is basically their front line, their line of defense, if you will, to keep their hands clean from all the germs that we're all walking around with. So if it's not hand sanitizer, then would you just say that it's best to just not use hand sanitizer at all, or alternatives, straight soap and water?
Good old soap and water is the best, right? Washing your hands for 20 seconds, at least. The time helps a little bit too. There's actually a lot of really clean, quote unquote, or less toxic hand sanitizers out there as well. Lots of good options for that. So, definitely seek those out. The problem with the hand sanitizers is that not only is it, have all these different toxins, it's got parabens in it. It has other of these endocrine disruptors contained in the hand sanitizer itself. So it's not even that the receipt factor, it's that it's got a bunch of other things in it as well that we're absorbing into our skin. And they used to put, I think they recently, I can't remember the name of the chemical, but there used to be a chemical in hand sanitizers that they then attributed, I believe, to being cancer causing. Don't quote me on that because I can't remember exactly what it was, but they actually, pulled that out of hand sanitizers not too long ago because of that, but they still aren't great. It's like, great, they fixed that, but there's still a lot of things, I wouldn't use it personally. So.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for elaborating on that.
Yeah. So the second one, and this is one of the ones that, let me just say one other thing about BPA. The nice thing about BPA, when we get to the part about, what to avoid, which is all the things I just kind of listed, when they've done studies on people where they tested their levels, which is usually in the urine is where they're testing the excretion of that, when they had high levels and then they avoided BPA for not even that long period of a time, the number significantly comes down. So it is one of those that avoiding it really makes a difference, and our body will clear it out relatively quickly. So that's good.
So all hope is not lost.
Not for BPA at least. Yes. Now this next one, not so much. So the next one is, these are called POPs. They're persistent organic pollutants. And so that persistent part is the part that's not good, right? So these are things that are in our environment. They've actually, some of them been in our environment for a long time. They've actually been banned and aren't allowed anymore. Like PCBs would be an example of this. But they are like almost permanent. We can't get rid of them in our environment. And so unfortunately, they are still, accumulated in our food and water, especially PCBs that's one of the toxins that could be in fish, especially farm raised. Atlantic would be another name for farm raised salmon. That tends to be one of the fish that's higher in PCB. So another reason to choose wild caught. Certain pesticides would fall in this category as well. Something called dioxides, which I'm going to talk about in a second, is also in this category. So those are the ones that you really need to be actively taking a supplement to detox. You won't be able to clear them out on your own. They'll just kind of keep accumulating in your body. So there are some that you kind of need to take something or be a bit more proactive about trying to detox. And we'll talk about those options here in a little bit.
Okay.
So the next one would be the PBDEs, which are the flame retardants that I mentioned earlier. So, and I'll get to this actually in a minute, but one of the things you can do is not buy brand new furniture, right? Try to buy really, high quality, gently used furniture that's already off gassed in someone else's house. And so you're not having to do that, right? That's one kind of thing to maybe try to do a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so PCBs, which is part of the POPs, a lot of acronyms here. Those are the ones that were banned
Quiz at the end, right?
What was that?
There'll be a quiz at the end,
There
right?
will be. There will
Yeah,
be.
totally.
Yes.
You guys better be paying attention, taking notes.
So the PCBs were banned in 1979, but they don't degrade. So they're in our soil, in our water, in our air, like I mentioned, and fish being a big source of that one. The next one is called Percolate. And that is really primarily found in our drinking water supplies. So another reason that water filtration is super important. And I want to talk about that at the end as well. Not all water filters are created the same. And so having a high quality one is really important.
Okay.
One of the things about Percolate that's interesting is that it tends to hinder the thyroid's absorption of iodine. So you can imagine how that would be really problematic for people who are suddenly having different thyroid issues. Iodine is necessary for thyroid function. And so if you are not able to absorb that, then you're going to start experiencing some hypothyroid type symptoms.
And is iodine something that we naturally produce?
We do not. We get it in our food, water, etc. I am a big fan of consuming iodine. There's different ways you want to do that. Food is always going to be the best source for that. So things like seaweed, and you can even get like kelp powder, like a good quality kelp powder that will kind of act like a salt shaker. So you really only need like a quarter of a teaspoon a day to get what you need. But those little seaweed snacks are great. I have another little shaker that's got some seaweed with sesame seeds and a couple things, and I put that on different Asian recipes. So those are kind of some other ways you can get that. And fish will also be a source of iodine. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, next, phthalates. So phthalates, if you're spelling it, it starts with a P. So it's a tricky word. The P is silent. This is found primarily in plastic packaging, but it's also in things like hairspray and different beauty products and hair care, shampoo. It's in vinyl flooring. So those are pretty common products, right, that we're exposed to. They're kind of nasty. They're linked to reproductive issues. Fertility in particular can be a big one that this is associated with. Endometriosis. It also can affect sperm quality, ovarian dysfunction, different things like that. So they did one study where pregnant women were exposed to phthalates and looked at kind of the results of that over time. And they have found that they typically give birth to children that have cognitive and behavioral problems. It can also be an underlying cause of ADHD, lower IQ, different things like that. So again, the quantity and the amount that you have in your system will determine, how big of an impact that you might have on that. So
are we going to find phthalates on, like, are we going to read it on our shampoo and conditioner bottles or hair products that, that do contain them? Or are they going to be sneaky little fucks and have a different word to hide it?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different words that would be used for those. What I would look for actually is a lot of products will say paraben and phthalate free. And so you can start, looking for that. I was also, going to mention that there's a really great resource through the Environmental Working Group. You can go on, they've got a Skin Deep website. I think they have another one as well, where you can go look up different products and it will tell you exactly what's in them. It rates them. There's different scores. So that's it doesn't have everything all the time. But if you're looking specifically to find something that's free of those, that's a great place to start.
And that is, isn't that just ewg.org?
I think so. Yeah. Hmm.
I was just going to double check just so as if people are like, oh, wait, what was that website? So if you go to and I'll put this in the show notes as well. But if you're like panicking right now, wait till you listen to the end. Like, don't like start panicking and go rummaging through your stuff. But ewg.org is the website that Brooke was just talking about. So you can grab it. I know that they have an app too as well that you
Hmm.
can scan products, I think.
Yeah, I
So
think so.
just kind of sidebar to that. So there's just a wealth of information on this website.
Yeah. And the good news is that there's a huge movement right now for clean products. And so back, several years ago, there was only a handful of different companies to really choose from. And now there are lots and lots of them to the point where it's hard to know which ones are the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the market's definitely getting more saturated, which is a good thing. So you have lots of options. Yeah.
And products that are going to be made in the US, which, you know, knowing our standards, I don't know if that really, speaks too highly of our standards and practices, but I know a lot of people are looking for products that are particularly made in the US. And so
Yes.
that's, I think, a part of the movement as well. At least, things that I've been seeing is going to.
Yeah, and there's a couple companies I used to really love, and I still do love. I don't really use their products as much, but Beauty Counter was one of the first kind of pioneer beauty care companies that they took it upon themselves to ban over 1,500 different chemicals. They kind of raised the bar and started that movement, and really they were going to the Capitol and trying to introduce legislation and do things like that. And so I think there's been a lot of companies that have followed that lead and that are doing similar things now. So yeah, just look for those types of companies.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Carry on. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. No, it's good. And then the last one I'll just mention here is parabens. And so parabens are used in, again, cosmetics, lotions, sunscreen, hair care products. Those are really another one that is going to be pretty common in products that you're using. You will see paraben free a lot. I see that on products all the time now, where they're really starting to pull that out um, and make that not be so prevalent in the products that they're using. So that's a good thing.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I think those are the main kind of ones that I wanted to cover that people would be familiar with somewhat. So maybe let's talk a little bit, if you want, about kind of how they affect the hormones, right? So we know that they're not great, but maybe how.
Yeah, I would love to. I think if you could expand on like now that we know what to identify, and I think a lot of this is probably not new to anyone. Maybe some of the terminology might be kind of like what, but at
Mhm.
least go, okay, wheels are turning. Um, and so just taking it to that next level, like what can they start doing? How do they start recognizing it? And, or I guess before we do that, what the impact that it's making. So now we know what they are, but what's the true impact that they can understand? And then I'd love to wrap up with here's what you can do. Like here are some, what you can do right now, this moment that you're done with this episode.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the big things that these EDCs do is they can block, they can imitate, they can interfere with your hormones, right? So remember in the beginning, I was talking about how we have all these receptors and we have these chemical messengers that are going around and communicating with different cells. And so there's a variety of different ways that these EDCs can then interfere with that process. They can actually bind to those receptors so that what we actually want to bind, those hormones can't bind. They can mess with the communication and the signaling, making it really confusing so that the cells don't understand what the message is and what they're supposed to be doing. They can inhibit that cell signaling. They can, that epigenetic piece, right? So they can also modify the expression of genes. And so that can change the outcome of how things are working for you. So this could even play into the detox process itself, where the epigenetics these could be disrupting the ability of that to be detoxed. So for one example, and this is a bit of a different example, but glyphosate, which is a really commonly used herbicide. You may know it as Roundup, is common household gardening weed killer. which thankfully they've actually finally taken one step and they're banning that from personal home use in the next couple of years. But the problem is it's already ubiquitous in our environment, and ubiquitous, I know, sorry, big word, but it's just basically everywhere, right? It's in our water, it's in our soil, it's all over the place. We can't avoid it. So the other thing is it's sprayed on a lot of crops, food crops, and that's how we get it. The problem with glyphosate is the way that it interacts with our body and we metabolize it. It's really tricky, and it actually disables part of the detox pathway that allows us to detox it. And so that's how it works, even in the Roundup sense, where it is, resilient to, or these weeds, right, don't even grow. And that's kind of how that works. But it's doing the same thing in our body, where it's shutting down the ability for that to be detoxed. And so that's another one. I've run tons and tons of toxin tests on my clients, and I've yet to see one person not have high glyphosate in their tests. And this is even people who they eat organic, they drink all the clean water, they're doing all the things, and it is still high. So it's another one that we need some extra support to clear that one out.
Okay.
Yeah. So a couple other examples. So, our hormones, when we think of how we process and metabolize hormones, right? So whenever we're producing them, and then we have to break them down, metabolize them, and clear them out. So we don't just always have them. It's just this constant process where we produce, we break down, we detox, we excrete. And the two most important organs that do that are our liver and our kidneys. And so if those are not functioning well, or they are burdened with different toxins, or they're sluggish, et cetera, they may not be doing that process very well. So what these hormones, or what can happen with these EDCs, is they can actually interfere with how quickly or efficiently we are clearing those hormones. And so this is where we can see different imbalances, especially estrogen. I see as a big one, where there can be estrogen dominance, and the liver is just not clearing estrogen very well. And that can be partly to do with this. So they can affect the circulation in the body. So like BPA and certain pesticides actually restrict the circulation of testosterone in the body. BPA blocks signals that tell the pancreas to produce glucose, or tell the body that it doesn't have enough glucose. So it messes with that insulin signaling. There's others, antifungals and different things that also block insulin. So lots of ways they're just kind of messing with that hormone signaling that's going on in the body.
But basically that natural, what your body is innately conditioned to do, right? Yeah. That it knows what to do. We have all these foreign substances that are just getting in the way.
Yep.
Right. So we're having to kind of redirect and figure out how to effectively redirect that so it can get back on track.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So they're running interference, right? They're running interference. And so, the less our toxic burden, the easier they're going to be able to function. Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
So do you want to talk about ways we can kind of avoid these and reduce them now?
I think what I would love to kind of bring back home and wrap up here is, for those that are going, okay, shit, look, now that might set the panic zone, but, diffusing that a little bit and just saying, okay, well, there's so many things that you can do at home. And I know we've talked about this before we got on, but, what are some foods, or what are some actionable things that people can do right now, right after they're done listening, that can help support that? And I know you did make mention of some supplementation that is vital to the detoxification process that we can't adequately do ourselves. So maybe you can touch a little bit on that, because I do want to make sure that people can reach out to you and connect with you. So I'll have you make sure you share if anyone does want a deeper dive to connect with you. But if you could just kind of, breeze over some really basic things that people can do here and now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So first and foremost, two things you can do is, focus on quality food and water. And so those are probably two of the things we are exposed to most often, right? Every day, all day, that we can make a difference. So like I said, the filtered water, really important. Some of my favorites for this would be And there's, again, within this different levels, but something like Berkey is a pretty popular one. It's not perfect, but it's doing a lot of good stuff there. There's another one called Pristine Hydro that's more of an under sink one that I really like. I personally use a water distiller through a company called Pure Water. It's a bit of an investment, but it literally gets rid of everything. So it's completely pure. And then I add back in different minerals to balance the pH and kind of remineralize the water. If you're on more of a budget, what I would say, and you just want to start with something, the good choice that I would do there would be Zero Water is one good one. And you can buy that pretty much anywhere. It's a pitcher, kind of like a Brita, but it actually does clear out 100% of glyphosate. It's doing more than the average, Brita type filter. Fridge filters, I'm sorry to disappoint everyone, they are not doing much of anything. Maybe getting rid of a few things and the taste of chlorine, but they're not actually even filtering out the chlorine in your water. So if you're relying on a fridge filter, it's time to upgrade. So Zero Water, again, that's a really inexpensive first step. And then I would say start looking into maybe some of these a bit more, of an investment, but it's worth it, I think, for your health. That's such a vital part of our health. So
for sure. And I can attest to the Zero Water actually, because of Tony, my husband. He saw probably an ad and he's like, oh, let's check it out. And lo and behold, it literally zeroes out and he's tested it with water out of the fridge, water out of the tap, and then the Zero Water pitcher that we have. And I was like, damn, that thing actually does work. So, and it's affordable. So you don't need to go over, do a big overhaul in your entire water system in your home if you're on a budget. So thank you for sharing that one. Okay.
Yeah. Great. Okay. And then food. So best choice here is organic as much as possible. So, even organic isn't perfect, but it's at least not going to have as much of the pesticides and the herbicides. It's going to be a bit cleaner. So choose it as much as you can. At the very least, I would go look at the Environmental Working Group's Dirty Dozen list. So if you're on a really tight budget and you just can't afford to do a lot of organic, at least start there. So the Dirty Dozen is they test every year the foods that are highest in pesticide residue. And so you can at least stick with those 12 and make those organic to reduce some of your exposure. So just do what you can there. And meat. So fat, one thing I want to mention too. So fat is where we store toxins. Fat in food, fat in our bodies. That's where they like to hang out. And so when you are choosing foods that contain fat, especially animal fat, like animal proteins and dairy and things like that, I also feel like it's really important to choose organic in those cases, just because they are potentially storing toxins in the fat of that product. Oils would be another one. So back to the plastic thing. Buying olive oil or ghee or any of those really good quality oils in plastic containers, it's going to leach into the fat and store in your oil. So really try to only purchase those fats and oils in glass containers in order to prevent some of that.
Okay. And store it in
cool, dark areas. Yep. You don't want to buy massive, huge, especially things like anything that's an omega-3. So even things like chia seeds, we're kind of getting off topic here, but chia seeds or flax seeds, which are very high in omega-3s, and they're also very easily oxidized, which can make them rancid. And so when they're oxidized, that oxidized fat is not good for us. So I always keep nuts and seeds either in the fridge or in a freezer. They will last much longer when you do it that way.
Oh, I love that tip. Putting them in the freezer.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we talked about the Environmental Working Group being a really good resource. So avoiding fragrance and perfume. This is another really big one. And this isn't just like, perfume you spray. This could be scented candles. This can be air fresheners, your dryer sheets, all of those, your laundry soap. That smell that you think smells all great is just toxins that you're breathing in. If you can smell it, you're breathing in toxins. And so, really trying to get away from that. I know it's so hard because we just love everything so fresh and so clean.
Right. The
But
smell of clean laundry is quite spectacular, but we've gotten rid of, the smelly kind of fabrics softeners and laundry detergents years ago,
yeah,
and we make our own. So
yeah,
yeah.
good. So that's a big one. Body care also, like smelly lotions. Bath and Body Works is a toxic bomb. Sorry, Bath and Body Works.
Hey, we're not here to sugarcoat shit.
I know. I mean, sorry.
You're gonna
Yes.
offend
Okay.
anybody if they're offended. They've probably stopped listening by now.
Okay. Fair. We talked about the receipts. So that's another one, just really trying to avoid touching those as much as you can. Never microwaving plastic. So, going through your house and looking at plastic you have. Are you using plastic food containers? Are you drinking your water out of a plastic reusable bottle? Those types of things you want to start kind of replacing, but never microwave plastic. Heat and plastic, that's a no-no.
Right.
And then the other thing I would say is just, if you're feeling overwhelmed about this, there's no need to run through your house and literally throw everything away and start over. It's one of those things where, again, when you know better, do better, right? So when you run out of your shampoo, do some research between now and then and have one ready to go that you're like, okay, I'm going to try this one next when I run out of this, right? And just slowly start replacing all of those products that you use quite often with better versions of that. And eventually you'll kind of work through all of that. But it takes time. It's not, something you can do overnight. I think the biggest thing is just being aware of it. So, really doing inventory, going through your house and just taking inventory of how many products are you using on a regular basis that have all these toxins. And part of the problem is that when, the FDA is going through and saying, oh, these are safe and these chemicals are safe, they're testing one chemical by itself in a very small dose, and that's it. And so there's no testing done on the culmination or the accumulation of that every single day combined with, 70 other chemicals that you're exposed to. So it's this compounding effect that really is where the problem lies. And unfortunately, that's being overlooked when they're doing these types of safety, testing.
Right. Well, and what I want people to get out of any of these episodes, and this one in particular, because like I said, we have unpacked a lot, and I think that there's so much more that we could have expanded on. But just be willing to be educated, be willing to be open-minded. Just take little bits of maybe what Brooke shared today, and apply it. And if it's just like she just said, if you've got a shampoo or conditioner that you're almost done, maybe go use the environmental working group, the ewg.org, or go download their app and go source some better options. I always like the good, better, best. If you're not quite ready to go from the good to the best, maybe find what a better option is, especially a better budgetary option for yourself, because, not everyone should go 0 to 60. So just finding little things that you can make changes over time in your household, I think you'll see a notable difference over time. But just be willing to be open-minded and be willing to be educated. And sometimes it's almost that like attachment that you have to that nice smelling laundry detergent, as wonderful as it smells, like it's doing so much more damage than it is good. Is it worth having clothes that smell the way that they do? Like, it's so amazing when you said that. I had this like wave of that smell just because you pass somebody and you can smell how strong it is.
At the gym.
Yes. And I get it, right? Because they don't want to smell like BO, or your kids' stuff is really hard to get clean, especially if you got teenage boys like I do. But at the same time, there's so many alternatives out there, and we won't go through all of that, but I will make sure that anything that Brooke's referred to, and of course a way to get a hold of Brooke and get her resources will be listed in the show notes. So don't worry that you have to go back and re-listen to certain things she referred to. So I imagine we'll have something to drop for you guys there. But in closing, Brooke, what would be like the number one thing out of all of this for somebody that is completely, brand new to this or overwhelmed with everything? Like, what would you say the one thing is that they could focus on right now?
Yeah, so I would say obviously the list that we just went through, pick one that seems easy to you, right? Start with the low-hanging fruit of something you can do that's more like a quick and dirty. Okay, that's a no-brainer. I'm already halfway there. I just need to take this extra step. I was almost there already. Like
Yeah.
knock those ones out, right? And then, make a list of the other things you want to work on and kind of just go from there. When it comes to detoxing, so, what we want to start focusing on once we've reduced our toxic burden, that's kind of step one. And then we want to start working on, okay, now how do I kind of clear some of these things out? And there's, various levels that you can do when it comes to this. So, what I would say is if you're relatively young and healthy and you feel pretty good, you probably could start with introducing something like zeolite. I'm a huge fan of zeolite. Zeolite is it's found in our soil. It's a really good at binding and pulling out heavy metals in particular and some of these different chemicals. And so you can start with something like that. There's a couple different brands that I really like. One's called Cyto Detox. And then there's also some zeolite in another product line that I'm going to talk about in a sec called Cellcore. So, something like that. There is a certain form of zeolite that you want to use. So we'll make sure and put that in the notes as well so people know what to look for. But that's a really easy thing. You actually can get a little bottle, you spray 4 squirts in your mouth 3 times a day. It doesn't taste like anything. It's really kind of an easy thing. Even kids can do that. It's a really easy thing for kids to do. So that would be something easy you can start with. And then I would say if you have more chronic health issues, most of the time, things like autoimmune disease and those really chronic health issues, especially ongoing viral things like EBV which is Epstein-Barr virus, things like that. A lot of times there is a toxin undercurrent there that's causing a lot of those illnesses. And so I would say if you're in that category, you might want to look at a more intensive detox protocol. The company I really love, they do a great job, is called Cellcore. And they have a whole foundational protocol that I put a lot of my clients on. It's a 4-month protocol, and it goes through clearing out all the things, parasites, all of these environmental toxins, mycotoxins and mold, different viruses, yeast, candida. I call it running your dishwasher. It goes through and just kind of does a run through of all of them. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get rid of everything in one shot, but you can definitely put a big dent in it and feel a lot better. And so if you are interested in something like that, there's more of a kind of protocol that we can do to help with that. Other than that, just really introducing foods that support detox, right? Your diet every day, you're either adding foods that really provide building blocks for your detox pathways to be able to do this well, or you're putting more of a burden on it, right? So if you're eating sugar, if you're eating processed foods, if you're eating kind of a standard American diet, you're just further burdening that, right? Whereas if you're eating whole foods, and you're including cruciferous vegetables every single day, which is, the broccoli, the cauliflower, cabbage, kale, arugula, all those foods. The thiol family, which is the onions and the garlic, asparagus, artichokes, beets, all these foods are really supportive of liver function. I love dandelion greens. Dandelion tea is great. So there's a whole bunch of different things. People do these juice fasting cleanse things. And yes, I'm sure there's some situations where that makes sense. But I think it's a bit more involved than just doing that for a little bit of time. And then you have to be careful with the sugars involved in that. And so there's a whole nother layer to kind of working through that. But those would be like the main things I would start with, and really just, including those foods. Broccoli sprouts would be another one. Sulforaphane is a really important factor in our phase 1, phase 2 detox pathway. So things like that. Protein is another one. Actually, we really do need high quality protein for our detox pathways. So if you're not getting enough protein, that might be affecting your ability to detox as well.
That's probably the primary conversation piece that I have with clients that are just, they're calorically deficient. And so talking about it from the protein standpoint and getting inventory of what that is. So even just, from a nutritional standpoint, starting with that and taking inventory of the proteins that you're consuming and, making sure that you're getting that well-balanced set of macronutrients
Yeah.
and, those very clean and lean proteins, your variety of healthy fats, and then getting your carbohydrates, getting a variety of carbohydrates from seasonal foods. And Brooke does a really nice job and shared a lot about what some of those will be and should be. And it's overwhelming. I mean, to somebody that's brand new to like, okay, I got to do all of these things, like I said, we unpacked a lot.
We did.
So, just take it one step at a time. But if you are kind of in that category from, the good, better, best, and you really want, and you identify, what Brooke was sharing about needing to really do a full concentrated detox, then you definitely want to seek out a professional like Brooke. And I will I'll put some reference to what she was referring to as Cell Core, so you can reach out and ask her questions about it, if that's the direction that you want to go. But this has been so great, and I really think very, very informative. And I think a lot of people can take even just little micro bits from it and maybe come back and revisit and then expand on it. So I appreciate you sharing so much and being so willing to take your time out to talk about this. I mean, it's truly something that you're passionate about. And, like I said, we could probably have like 18 different episodes on all these different categories.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating, like nerding out on some of this stuff. Like, I love it. And I know that that's why we became such fast friends, because it was easy to like, oh my God, yes. And, we have, fire back and forth on text messages about things that we relate with. So
Yeah.
thank you
Well, thank
again.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
thank you
course.
so much for having me. This was so great. And hopefully people don't feel too overwhelmed. Again, just one step at a time. Just pick one thing to do this week and just focus on that.
Yep. Perfect. Well, thank you. I'll make sure to connect you guys all to how you can get in touch with Brooke. Follow her on Instagram, and you'll find various links to her website in the show notes. But until next time, you guys, thank you so much for being on here. Be sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another episode, because they're going to be good and worth your time. And we do hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to talking with you next. Have a good rest of your day.